What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Beast of Reincarnation unlocks in a matter of hours, and there are 4 questions people keep asking about it. Will it run on my PC? Is this a Souls-like? How does the combat actually work? And what should I do in my first hour? So instead of spreading that across 4 videos, this is the one that covers all of it. We are going through the full system requirements and the catch buried inside them, the difficulty and death systems that decide whether this punishes you, the combat loop between Emma and her dog, and then a straight checklist for getting started. Let us get into it. Let us start with the PC requirements because these got a lot of attention when they went up and not in a good way. On the minimum side, you are looking at an i5 8400 or a Ryzen 5 3600, 16 gigabytes of system memory, and a GTX 1070 or an RX 580 with 8 gigabytes of video memory. The recommended tier jumps to an i7 12700K or a Ryzen 7 5800X, paired with an RTX 3060 or an RX 6700 XT with 12 gigabytes. Both tiers want 45 gigabytes of space, and on both a solid-state drive is mandatory rather than suggested. Now here's the part that actually matters, and it is why those requirements made headlines. Look at what each tier is promising. The minimum specification is not aiming at a smooth 60 frames. It is aiming at 1080p on low settings at around 40 frames, and it already assumes you are running upscaling to get there. So that GTX 1070 number arrives with the safety net already switched on. Then you go up to the recommended tier, the one meant to be the comfortable experience, and it targets 1080p on medium at 60 frames, also with upscaling, and specifically with that upscaling set to performance mode. Performance mode renders at a substantially lower internal resolution and reconstructs the rest, so an RTX 3060 on medium at 1080p is expected to need aggressive upscaling to hold 60. That is a demanding game by any reasonable reading. So will it actually run well? The honest answer is that nobody knows yet, and I want to be straight with you about why. This game is built on Unreal Engine 5, which has a reputation for traversal stutter and shader compilation hitches even in games that are otherwise well optimized. There was no public beta and no public test, so the build has never been stressed across thousands of different hardware configurations, and the review embargo does not lift early, it lifts at the exact moment the game unlocks. That means there is no benchmark data and no performance coverage to check before you commit. Anyone telling you right now how many frames you will get is guessing. Treat launch night as the test, cap your frame rate rather than chasing an uncapped number and expect a patch early. Before we leave the technical side, a few practical things worth sorting tonight. Preload is already live across platforms, so there is no reason to be sitting on a download bar when the servers flip over. Install sizes come in around 30 gigabytes on PlayStation 5, roughly 33 on Xbox, and 45 on PC. There is no Steam Deck compatibility rating, which given those requirements is not surprising, so handheld players should expect to do some tuning. And if you are playing on Game Pass, check your tier before launch rather than at launch because it is on the Ultimate and PC tiers only. On timing, the global unlock is midnight UTC, which for most of the United States lands on the evening of the 3rd rather than the morning of the 4th. Right, the question that has generated more argument than anything else about this game, is it a Souls-like? The reason people cannot agree is that the evidence genuinely points both ways. On one side, the store tags say Souls-like. The combat is built around precise parries with tight timing windows, and the game is structured around big set-piece bosses. If you looked only at a combat clip, you would file it next to Sekiro without hesitating, but the team behind it has pushed back on that label directly, describing something more approachable than the genre it resembles. And when you look at the actual systems rather than the surface, they are right because the two things that define how harshly a Souls-like treats you, what dying costs, and how far the game will meet you halfway, both work very differently here. Start with dying because this is the big one. In this game, death does not take anything from you. There is no pile of currency dropped where you fell, no run back to recover it, and no losing your materials or your experience because you misread one attack. You simply go again, and it goes further because enemies you have already cleared stay cleared, so you are not fighting through the same corridor of trash mobs. Every attempt just to reach the thing that killed you, if you have ever bounced off this style of game, that specific frustration is usually the reason, and it has been removed. What that does to how you play is significant because it makes experimenting almost free. The second half of the answer is difficulty, and there are 3 modes from the start: normal, hard, and story. Normally, story mode in a game like this just means enemies have less health and you walk through it, which teaches you nothing. This one is smarter. Story mode widens the actual parry timing windows and reduces the damage you take. That distinction matters because you're still learning the real mechanic the same parry you would use on hard, you are just getting a more forgiving window while it clicks. You are not being given a different game. You are being given more room. And you can switch between all three at any point with nothing locked off. So my answer on the Souls-like question is that it borrows the combat vocabulary but deliberately throws out the punishment. So how does the fighting actually work? You control Emma directly and she handles like a fast melee character. Katana combos up close, dodges, and a ranged option with bows and crossbows for chipping at things from distance. That much is familiar. The piece that makes this game its own thing is what your defense is for. When you land a clean parry, you take 0 damage, which is the reward you would expect, but it also fills a gauge, and that gauge is the entire fuel supply for your dog's abilities. That single decision changes how you approach a fight. In most games, playing cautiously and rolling away is the safe option. Here it starves you because if you never commit to a parry, you never generate the resource. Aggression and precision are not the risky choice here. They are the economy, which brings us to Koo. And the best way to understand him is to stop thinking of him as a pet and start thinking of him as your ability bar. He moves and attacks on his own in a light way, but the meaningful things he does are the ones you spend that gauge on, and those cover a genuine spread, crowd control, binding enemies in place, fire damage, and healing. When you go to use one, time slows down while you pick the ability and the target, but there is an extra step because executing the ability involves a quick time input as well, so it is not a fire and forget menu. And if your dog goes down mid-fight, you have lost access to your entire special ability system. One more combat habit worth building before you start, and it is the one that separates people who find the bosses fair from people who find them exhausting. Stop watching the health bar. Enemies here have a second meter, a down gauge, and filling it staggers them and opens a takedown finisher that does far more damage than grinding away at their health ever will. So the correct question in the middle of a fight is not how much health does this thing have left, it is how close am I to breaking it. Once you start reading fights that way, the whole pace of a boss encounter changes. So you are in, the game is installed. What do you actually do? 4 things. First, pick your difficulty honestly rather than proudly because you can move it at any time and nothing is gated behind it. Second, spend your first stretch deliberately parrying weak enemies until the timing feels natural because everything else runs downstream of that. Third, understand that you are building 2 characters and not 1, since Emma and Koo have separate skill trees drawing from a shared pool of points, so neglecting one side leaves you lopsided. And fourth, the one that catches people out, your 3 attributes do not just raise your numbers, they also gate what you can unlock in those trees. So if you are staring at a node you cannot take, the answer is almost always an attribute requirement rather than a missing skill point. And that is everything I would want to know going in. The specs are heavier than they look once you notice the upscaling assumption. The Souls-like label fits the combat, but not the punishment. Your defense is what powers your offense, and your first hour is better spent on parry practice than rushing the story. I will be back once the game is out with a proper settings and optimization breakdown, testing what to turn down first for the biggest frame rate gain. So keep an eye out for that one. In the meantime, let me know down in the comments what you are playing on, what settings you are running, and whether you are going in on story, normal, or straight to hard. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you in the next one.